told to move. Hands up and turn
I
around.
haven't done anything wrong. This isn't necessary.
Do it now or you will be detained.
The morning sun streamed through the finger-painted windows of Sunshine Kids Learning Center, casting rainbow shadows across the tiny chairs and alphabet rugs. Tuesday, 9:47 a.m., the kind of Texas spring morning that promised warmth without the brutal summer heat, where the air still carried the sweetness of blooming jasmine from the garden outside. In the butterfly room, 12 toddlers sat in a wobbly circle, singing about wheels on buses while their teacher clapped along. Down the hall, infants napped in cribs beneath mobiles of smiling clouds. The smell of graham crackers and apple juice drifted from the snack station. Sunshine Kids occupied a cheerful, single-story building in Cedar Mills, a diverse suburban neighborhood 20 minutes outside Dallas. The center had served the community for 15 years, its waiting list perpetually full, its reputation built on warmth and genuine care. Bright murals covered every wall, giraffes stretching toward painted clouds, dolphins leaping through cotton candy waves, a rainbow arching over children of every shade holding hands. Parents lingered at drop-off, chatting with staff they'd known for years. This was the kind of place where teachers remembered every child's favorite snack, every parent's work schedule, every family's story. Security cameras watched it all. 8 of them positioned throughout the facility, capturing every corner, every entrance, every moment of the day. The system recorded continuously in high definition, storing footage for 60 days before overwriting. Standard procedure for any licensed childcare facility: protection against liability, documentation for concerned parents, evidence in case of accidents or disputes. What those cameras captured over the next 43 minutes would become the cornerstone of a federal lawsuit that would make national headlines. Would show the moment 3 men in tactical vests pushed through the front door without signing in. Would document the terror that unfolded in the butterfly room. Would preserve, in unflinching detail, 12 toddlers screaming for a teacher being dragged away in handcuffs. But at 9:47 a.m., none of that had happened yet. At 9:47 a.m., Sunshine Kids Learning Center was just a daycare on a Tuesday morning, full of finger paint and graham crackers, and children who believed the adults in their lives would always keep them safe. Monique Lawson had Texas running through her veins 3 generations deep. Her grandmother, Beulah Mae Lawson, had picked cotton in East Texas until her fingers bled, had marched for voting rights in Houston, had lived to see her granddaughter earn a college degree, and wept at the graduation ceremony. Her mother, Evelyn, had taught 3rd grade at the same elementary school for 31 years, shaping hundreds of young minds with patience and chalk dust and an unwavering belief that every child could learn. Monique had grown up surrounded by that legacy. Houston-born, Houston-raised. She'd played in the same parks her mother had played in, attended the same church her grandmother had helped build. She'd graduated from Westbury High School with honors, then earned her early childhood education degree from Prairie View A&M University, the same historically black university her grandfather had dreamed of attending but never could. She was 34 years old. She'd worked at Sunshine Kids Learning Center for 8 years, starting as an assistant teacher making $11 an hour, working her way up through dedication and genuine love for the work. Now she was lead toddler room teacher, responsible for the butterfly room and its 12 tiny humans. She had certifications in infant CPR, child development, early intervention techniques. She had a file full of glowing performance reviews and a wall of thank you cards from parents. The children adored her. They called her Miss Mo, reached for her when they were scared, showed her their drawings before anyone else. Parents requested her by name, some staying on the waiting list for months, specifically to get their child into her room. She knew every kid's quirks who needed extra time with transitions, who had allergies, who was struggling at home and needed gentler handling. Monique Lawson was, by every measure, an ordinary American living an ordinary life. She paid taxes. She voted in every election. She had an apartment in Cedar Mills, a car payment, a savings account for the house she hoped to buy someday. Her birth certificate sat in a fireproof safe at her mother's house in Houston, alongside her Social Security card, her passport, and 3 generations of family documents proving what should never have needed proving. She was the heartbeat of Sunshine Kids, and in 11 minutes, federal agents would stop that heart cold. Monique's Tuesday began like every other workday for the past 8 years. She pulled into the Sunshine Kids parking lot at 7:15 a.m., coffee in hand, her bag stuffed with laminated flashcards she'd made the night before. The morning was still cool, dew clinging to the grass around the playground equipment. She unlocked the side entrance with her staff key, disabled the alarm, and headed straight for the butterfly room. Preparation was everything with toddlers. She wiped down the tiny tables with disinfectant, arranged the chairs in a circle for morning meeting, set out the bins of crayons and blocks. She prepped the snack station, animal crackers and apple slices, small cups ready for juice. She queued up the morning songs on the classroom tablet, tested the volume, made sure the backup batteries were charged. By 7:45, the first parents started arriving. Drop-offs were always a mix of tearful goodbyes and eager runners. Monique greeted each child by name, complimented new shoes and fresh haircuts, assured anxious parents that yes, everything would be fine. Yes, she'd make sure Maya got her blanket at nap time. By 9:30, all 12 of her toddlers had arrived. The butterfly room hummed with controlled chaos, the natural state of any space containing a dozen 2-year-olds. They'd made it through circle time, stumbling through the days of the week song, arguing over who got to hold the weather bear. They'd survived a minor crisis when 2 boys wanted the same fire truck. Now they were in free play, the noise level hovering somewhere between cheerful and deafening. Monique knelt beside Sophia Reyes, a tiny girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, helping her with Velcro shoes that refused to cooperate. Sophia was chattering about her cat, something about whiskers and breakfast, the words tumbling out faster than her tongue could manage. "Almost got it, baby girl," Monique said, pressing the strap into place. "There, good as new." The front door buzzer sounded. Nothing unusual late drop-offs happened. Delivery drivers came by, parents forgot things. Through the butterfly room's interior window, Monique could see Denise at the reception desk, rising to answer. 3 men in tactical vests pushed through before Denise could reach the door. The letters on their chests were visible even from 40 feet away. ICE. Monique's hands froze on Sophia's shoe. They moved like men accustomed to resistance. Tactical formation, hands near belts, eyes scanning the space with practiced efficiency. 3 federal agents in a room designed for finger painting and nap time, their boots heavy on floors meant for tiny socked feet. Lead agent Victor Stanton was already talking before Monique could stand. "Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We need to speak with employees regarding work authorization." His voice carried across the butterfly room, flat and loud, cutting through the chatter of 12 toddlers who didn't yet understand what was happening, but they felt it. Children always feel it. The room went quiet in patches, some kids freezing mid-play, others looking up with wide eyes, a few continuing to babble, oblivious. Monique rose slowly, positioning herself between the agents and her children. She kept her voice calm, her movements deliberate. 15 years from now, body camera footage would show how steady she remained in this moment, how her hands didn't shake even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "You're in a classroom full of 2-year-olds, she said, her voice low but firm. "Whatever you need, we can discuss it outside." Stanton didn't move. "Ma'am, I need to see identification and proof of legal work status, now. I'm a U.S. citizen, born in Houston, Texas. I've worked here for 8 years. Monique kept her body angled toward the children, a human shield in a cardigan and sensible flats. "My documents are in my locker in the staff room. I'm asking you, please, step into the hallway. These are babies." Behind her, Sophia had started whimpering, her small hand reaching for Monique's leg. Another child, a boy named Deshaun, stood frozen by the block station, his lower lip trembling. The energy in the room was shifting, confusion curdling into fear, the way it does when children sense adults are scared. Agent Stanton's partners had spread out. One blocked the interior door, the other moved along the wall, his eyes cataloging faces, taking mental notes Monique couldn't read. "Ma'am, you need to come with us to verify your status. Step away from the children." I'm not leaving this room until someone qualified takes over care of these kids. Monique's voice didn't waver. Call my director. Call corporate. I'm not abandoning 12 toddlers with strangers. Stanton's jaw tightened. Behind Monique, Sophia began to cry. The agents didn't move toward the hallway. They spread wider instead. Agent Kowalski positioned himself at the interior door, his broad frame blocking the only exit to the rest of the building. Agent Brennan pulled out his phone and began photographing the room, the murals, the cubbies with children's names, the tiny faces staring up at him with growing confusion. The flash blinked again and again, clinical and cold. Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again. Stanton's voice had hardened, patience evaporating like morning dew. Produce documentation now or you'll be detained for failure to comply. My purse is in my locker. Monique kept her voice steady, though her pulse was screaming. Staff room, down the hall. My driver's license, my employee ID, everything is there. Let me get it, or let me call Lorraine Okafor, our director. She has all my employment records, I-9 forms, background checks, everything went through proper channels when I was hired. We'll verify through our own channels. Step away from the children. I'm not leaving them alone with, they won't be alone. Your coworkers can handle it. Stanton gestured vaguely toward the door, toward staff members who weren't there, toward a handoff that hadn't been arranged. Move, now. Sophia's crying had grown louder, her small body pressed against Monique's leg, arms wrapped tight around her knee. The sound triggered a chain reaction. Toddlers are tuned to each other's distress like instruments in an orchestra of fear. One by one, the whimpering spread. A boy named Marcus started hiccuping, tears streaming down his round cheeks. A girl clutching a stuffed rabbit began wailing for her mama. Deshaun hadn't moved from the block station. He stood frozen, tears sliding silently down his face, watching the men in black vests with the kind of stillness that breaks hearts. Brennan's camera kept flashing. Kowalski stood like a statue at the door. The security camera in the corner recorded everything, the growing terror in 12 small faces, the agent photographing babies like evidence, the woman in the cardigan trying to hold the world together with nothing but her body and her voice. Please. Monique heard the crack in her own voice, hated it. Please. They're 2 years old. Whatever you think I've done, they haven't done anything. Step outside. 60 seconds. That's all I'm asking. Stanton reached for her arm. His grip was iron. Stanton's hand closed around Monique's wrist and yanked, pulling her away from the children with a force that nearly took her off her feet. She stumbled, caught herself, and then the cold metal was circling her wrists, the ratcheting click of handcuffs echoing through a room full of alphabet posters and crayon drawings. The butterfly room exploded. 12 voices erupted at once, screaming, sobbing, shrieking in a chorus of pure terror. Miss Mo, Miss Mo. The words tore from tiny throats, raw and desperate. Sophia collapsed onto the floor, her whole body shaking with sobs so violent she couldn't breathe. Marcus ran in circles, wailing. A little girl named Destiny started hyperventilating, her face going red, then purple. Deshaun broke free from his frozen state and sprinted toward Monique, his small arms outstretched, reaching for the only safety he knew. Agent Brennan stepped into his path, a wall of tactical vest and federal authority blocking a 2-year-old boy from his teacher. Deshaun bounced off the agent's legs and fell backward, landing hard on his bottom, his wail joining the others. Stop! Stop this right now! Lorraine Okafor burst through the door. Kowalski had been blocking, shoving past him with the force of a woman who'd spent 30 years protecting children. Her reading glasses hung crooked on her face, her cardigan buttoned wrong, clearly interrupted mid-task. What are you doing? This is a licensed childcare facility. You can't... Ma'am, stand back or you'll be charged with obstruction. Kowalski's voice was bored, rehearsed. Federal investigation. Federal investigation of what? She's been with me for 8 years. I have all her documents. They weren't listening. They were already moving. Stanton and Brennan flanking Monique, guiding her through the chaos of screaming children toward the front of the building. Past the infant room where babies startled awake. Past Denise at reception, her hand pressed to her mouth in horror. Past the cheerful welcome sign and the parent bulletin board. Past the front windows, where 3 parents arriving for early pickup watched a black woman in handcuffs being escorted out of their children's daycare. The phones came out immediately. The footage would be online within the hour. The screaming didn't stop for hours. Lorraine Okafor moved through the butterfly room like a medic in a war zone, gathering children into her arms, calling for backup staff, trying to contain a catastrophe that had already detonated. But there was no containing it. Sophia had to be physically peeled off the floor where she'd collapsed, her small body rigid with terror, her voice gone hoarse from shrieking. Deshawn had retreated under a table and refused to come out, flinching every time an adult approached. Marcus vomited from crying so hard. 3 children couldn't catch their breath. Destiny's hyperventilation worsened until her lips turned blue. A boy named Jalen started gasping, his tiny chest heaving. A girl named Amara passed out cold on the reading rug. Lorraine called 911. While her assistant director loaded all 3 into her personal car, the ambulance would take too long. She decided in a split-second calculation that would later be scrutinized in depositions. All 3 children were treated for acute stress response at Cedar Mills Urgent Care. All 3 were under the age of 3. By 10:30 a.m., every parent on the Sunshine Kids contact list had received an emergency call. There's been an incident. We need you to pick up your child immediately. We'll explain when you arrive. The parking lot filled with panicked mothers and fathers, some still in work clothes, others in pajamas, all of them demanding answers that Lorraine didn't fully have. She told them what she knew. Federal agents. Monique detained. No charges explained. The children witnessed everything. Parents wept. Parents screamed. Parents held their traumatized toddlers and rocked them in the parking lot, afraid to take them inside, afraid to leave, afraid of a world where this could happen in a place designed to be safe. By 11 a.m., Lorraine had called corporate headquarters and secured a directive to preserve all security footage. By 11:15, she'd contacted a lawyer, a former parent, whose child had graduated to kindergarten 2 years prior, but who still sent holiday cards. By 11:30, the first parent video had been posted to Facebook. By noon, local news vans were parked outside Sunshine Kids Learning Center, their cameras pointed at the cheerful rainbow mural like an accusation. The footage spread, the story caught fire, and somewhere in a federal holding facility, Monique Lawson had no idea the world was starting to watch. The cell was cold. That was what Monique would remember most clearly in the months that followed the relentless, bone-deep cold of concrete and metal and recycled air that seemed designed to remind you that comfort was a privilege you'd lost. They processed her in silence, photographed her, fingerprinted her, took her watch, her earrings, the hair tie from her wrist. Asked questions she answered over and over: name, date of birth, place of birth, citizenship status, until the words lost meaning, until Houston, Texas felt like a prayer she was begging them to believe. She asked for a phone call, request denied. She asked again at hour 2, hour 3, hour 4, denied, denied, denied. The agents cycled through shifts, new faces replacing old ones, none of them meeting her eyes, all of them treating her like a problem to be processed rather than a person to be helped. At hour 6, they finally let her call. Evelyn Lawson answered on the first ring. Baby, baby, where are you? It's all over the news. Mama, Monique's voice cracked for the first time since the handcuffs clicked. I need you to bring my documents. Birth certificate, social security card, passport. They're in the safe. I'm already in the car. Of course she was. Evelyn Lawson hadn't raised a fool, and she hadn't raised a victim. I'm coming, baby. I'm coming. The drive from Houston took 4 hours. Evelyn arrived at the facility by 8 p.m., documents in hand, fire in her eyes. She presented everything: original birth certificate from Houston Methodist Hospital, social security card issued 34 years ago, passport renewed last spring for a cruise that never happened. The verification should have taken minutes. It took 28 more hours. No explanation, no updates, no apologies. Monique sat in that cold cell while bureaucracy ground its slow gears, while paperwork sat on desks unexamined, while her mother waited in a plastic chair in a fluorescent lobby and refused to leave. Monique survived by reaching backward, by closing her eyes and hearing her grandmother's voice, rough with age and sweet with faith, singing the hymns that had carried Beulah May Lawson through cotton fields and courtrooms, and a life spent being told she didn't belong. "Precious Lord, take my hand," Monique whispered to the concrete walls. "Lead me on. Let me stand." 42 hours after agents dragged her from a room full of screaming toddlers, Monique Lawson walked out of federal detention. Her mother caught her before she collapsed. Nadine Beaumont had spent 23 years making federal agencies regret their worst decisions. Her office in downtown Dallas was modest, no mahogany, no leather chairs, no intimidation tactics dressed up as decor. Just file cabinets stuffed with case histories, a wall of framed verdicts, and a reputation that preceded her into every courtroom. Immigration enforcement cases were her specialty. She'd seen it all: workplace raids, traffic stop detentions, families torn apart on suspicion and assumption. But when Monique Lawson walked into her office 2 weeks after her release, Nadine knew immediately this case was different. "They did it in front of the children," Monique said, her voice steady but her hands trembling around a cup of water she hadn't touched. 12 toddlers watched them drag me out in handcuffs. 3 of them ended up in urgent care. Nadine leaned forward. "Tell me everything." The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage from Sunshine Kids captured every angle: the agents pushing through the front door, the confrontation in the butterfly room, the handcuffing, the screaming children, the chaos left behind. 8 cameras, 43 minutes of uninterrupted documentation. Body camera footage, obtained through FOIA requests after months of bureaucratic stonewalling, confirmed what the Daycare cameras showed and added audio that made jurors flinch during depositions. 9 parents provided witness statements. 3 had been in the parking lot during the arrest, their phone videos already viral. 6 others documented their children's trauma in painful detail: the nightmares, the bedwetting, the terror at seeing anyone in uniform. Lorraine Okafor and 4 staff members gave testimony about the agents' refusal to follow any reasonable protocol, their dismissal of offers to verify employment, their treatment of a licensed childcare facility like a smuggling operation. Medical records told the rest. 3 children treated for acute stress response, 2 prescribed child-appropriate anxiety medication. 1 little girl, Sophia Reyes, had stopped speaking entirely for 11 days after the incident. The lawsuit filed in federal court alleged unlawful seizure, Fourth Amendment violations, racial profiling, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligent infliction of emotional distress on minor children. 27 pages of constitutional violations committed against a woman whose only crime was being black in a daycare center in Texas. They made assumptions, Nadine told reporters outside the courthouse, and those assumptions traumatized a woman, devastated a community, and terrorized 12 innocent children. We intend to hold them accountable. Discovery broke the case wide open. Federal attorneys fought every request, filed motion after motion to seal documents, claimed national security concerns that collapsed under judicial scrutiny. Judge Patricia Thornton, a no-nonsense appointee with zero patience for obstruction, denied each attempt with increasingly pointed language. "The government does not get to hide misconduct behind classification stamps," she wrote in one ruling. "Transparency is not optional." What emerged from the unsealed documents was damning. Internal ICE communications showed that Stanton, Kowalski, and Brennan had been conducting a neighborhood sweep that morning, not based on specific intelligence, not responding to credible tips, but targeting Cedar Mills because demographic data suggested high probability of undocumented workers. No individual names, no specific locations, just assumptions drawn from census information about a diverse suburban community. Agent Stanton's text messages were worse. 3 days before the Sunshine Kids raid, he'd messaged a colleague, "Heading to Cedar Mills tomorrow. Easy targets. Should hit quota before lunch." Another text, sent the night before, "Daycares and restaurants. Low resistance. Quick processing." The casual cruelty of it sat in the courtroom like a stench no one could ignore. Depositions revealed contradictions, stacked on contradictions. Stanton claimed he'd received a tip about undocumented workers at Sunshine Kids. When pressed for documentation, none existed. Kowalski said they'd followed standard protocol. When confronted with the actual protocols, which required supervisor approval before entering childcare facilities, he went silent. Brennan couldn't explain why he'd photographed the children, couldn't justify blocking a 2-year-old boy from reaching his teacher, couldn't meet anyone's eyes when the security footage played on the courtroom screen. Expert witnesses drove the final nails. Child psychologists testified about the long-term damage of witnessing caregiver detention, disrupted attachment, chronic anxiety, developmental regression. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a specialist in early childhood trauma, presented research showing that experiences like what the butterfly room children endured could alter brain development, could echo through decades of life. These children learned that the adults who protect them can be taken away without warning. Dr. Vance said, her voice quiet but devastating. That is not a lesson any 2-year-old should learn. The defense had nothing left. The evidence had already spoken. The trial lasted 3 weeks. It felt like 3 years. Federal Courtroom 4B in Dallas became a theater of accountability. Every seat filled, overflow crowds watching via closed-circuit feed in adjacent rooms. Media from across the country had descended. This wasn't just a local story anymore. This was a referendum on enforcement, on assumptions, on what happens when power meets prejudice in a room full of toddlers. Monique took the stand on day 4. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her grandmother's cross around her neck. Nadine guided her through the story gently, methodically, her Houston childhood, her family's legacy, her education, her career. The jury heard about Beulah May picking cotton with bleeding fingers, about Evelyn teaching 3rd grade for 31 years, about 3 generations of Texas women who'd built lives through work and faith and stubborn refusal to be erased. "Why do you work with toddlers?" Nadine asked. Monique's voice caught. "Because they're just starting to learn who they are. They're learning whether the world is safe, whether people can be trusted. I wanted to be someone who taught them yes. The world is safe. People can be trusted." She paused, wiping her eyes. Those agents taught them the opposite. In 43 minutes, they undid everything I'd spent years building. Parents testified next. One after another, they described children who'd been bright and curious before that Tuesday morning and were now shadows of themselves. Nightmares that persisted months later. Fear of strangers so intense that doctors' visits required sedation. Regression, children who'd been potty trained suddenly wetting themselves again. Children who'd been speaking in sentences retreating to single words. Sophia Reyes's mother sobbed on the stand. She didn't talk for 11 days. My baby girl, who never stopped chattering, went silent. And when she finally spoke again, the first thing she said was, "Where's Miss Mo? Did the bad men take her away forever?" Child psychologists presented clinical evidence. Lorraine Okafor testified about the devastation to Sunshine Kids, 4 staff members who quit immediately, too traumatized to return, 12 families who withdrew their children, a waiting list that evaporated overnight. A business built on trust, shattered by 3 men who couldn't be bothered to verify a birth certificate. On day 12, the security footage played. The courtroom fell silent as the jury watched. 8 camera angles synchronized, showing every moment. The agents pushing through, the confrontation, the handcuffs clicking shut, and then the screaming. 12 tiny voices shrieking in terror, the sound quality crystal clear, impossible to ignore or minimize or explain away. Sophia collapsing, Deshawn being blocked by Agent Brennan. Children running in circles, crying for Miss Mo, their world ending in real time. Several jurors wiped their eyes. One asked for a recess. Agent Stanton, sitting at the defense table, stared at his hands and didn't look up for the rest of the day. 7 hours. That's how long the jury deliberated before requesting to return to the courtroom. Monique sat between her mother and Nadine, her hands folded in her lap, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Evelyn gripped her daughter's arm, her lips moving in silent prayer. Behind them, the gallery was packed. Parents from Sunshine Kids, advocates, reporters, strangers who'd followed the case and needed to see how it ended. Judge Thornton called the court to order. The foreperson, a middle-aged black woman in a burgundy blazer, stood with the verdict form trembling slightly in her hands. On the claim of unlawful seizure in violation of the Fourth Amendment, how does the jury find? We find the defendants liable. On the claim of racial discrimination in enforcement, we find the defendants liable. On the claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress, liable. On the claim of negligent infliction of emotional distress upon minor children, liable. Unanimous. Every count. The word liable echoed through the courtroom like a bell tolling justice. Judge Thornton turned to the damages phase. The foreperson continued reading, her voice growing stronger with each figure. Compensatory damages for Monique Lawson's unlawful detention, psychological trauma, lost wages, and ongoing treatment, $2,400,000. Evelyn's grip tightened on Monique's arm. Additional compensatory damages to be allocated to a therapeutic fund for the affected children of Sunshine Kids Learning Center, $1,200,000. Somewhere in the gallery, a parent let out a choked sob. Punitive damages against the defendants, intended to punish the egregious conduct and deter future violations of civil rights, $4,800,000. The foreperson looked up from the paper, her eyes finding Monique's across the courtroom. Total award, $8,400,000. The courtroom erupted. Applause, cheers, weeping a release of tension that had been building for months. Advocates embraced. Parents clutched each other. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Monique didn't move. She sat perfectly still as her mother collapsed against her shoulder, weeping with a grief and relief too tangled to separate. Nadine squeezed her hand once, firm and brief, professional to the end. At the defense table, Agent Victor Stanton stared at the floor. His face was gray, emptied of the arrogance that had carried him into a daycare full of toddlers 8 months ago. Kowalski sat rigid, jaw clenched. Brennan had his head in his hands. Monique finally allowed herself to breathe. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about the record, permanent, public, undeniable that what they'd done was wrong. That 12 children's screams had been heard. That her grandmother's granddaughter had stood in a federal courtroom and refused to be erased. $8,400,000. The cost of assuming a black woman in a cardigan didn't belong in her own country. The consequences came swift and absolute. Agents Victor Stanton, Kowalski, and Brennan were terminated within 6 weeks of the verdict. Internal review boards that had dragged their feet for months suddenly found urgency, their reports echoing what the jury had already declared: gross misconduct, violation of protocols, conduct unbecoming of federal officers. Stanton appealed his termination. The appeal was denied. His text messages about easy targets and hitting quota had been read into the public record. No agency wanted that stain on their roster. Policy changes followed. The Department of Homeland Security issued new protocols requiring supervisor approval before any enforcement action at childcare facilities, schools, hospitals, or medical centers. Written documentation of probable cause became mandatory before detention. Verification of citizenship claims was required within 12 hours, not 42. The reforms weren't perfect. Advocates pointed out loopholes, enforcement gaps, the distance between written policy and lived practice, but they were something. They were acknowledgement that what happened in the butterfly room should never happen again. Monique didn't touch the settlement money for 3 months. It sat in an account while she focused on healing therapy twice a week, long walks with her mother, quiet evenings relearning how to feel safe in her own skin. The nightmares faded slowly. The flinch at unexpected sounds took longer. When she was ready, she knew exactly what to do. The Beulah May Lawson Scholarship Fund launched on what would have been her grandmother's 93rd birthday. Full tuition for early childhood education students from underrepresented communities, black and brown women who wanted to do what Monique had done, who wanted to shape young minds and build safe spaces, who deserved support instead of suspicion. The first class of recipients included 12 scholars, one for each child who'd been in the butterfly room that Tuesday morning. 8 months after her detention, Monique returned to Sunshine Kids. She'd considered other paths. Other centers had offered positions, higher pay, fresh starts, places where no one would look at her and remember. But Sunshine Kids was home. The butterfly room was hers. Running away felt like letting them win. Her first morning back, she arrived at 7:15, just like always. Unlocked the side entrance, disabled the alarm, walked to the butterfly room and stood in the doorway, breathing through the tightness in her chest. The room looked the same. Tiny chairs, alphabet rug, finger-painted windows catching the morning light. At 8:30, the children started arriving. New faces mixed with familiar ones. Some families had returned when they heard Miss Mo was coming back. And then, clutching her mother's hand in the doorway, there was Sophia Reyes, 3 years old now, pigtails, gap-toothed smile, eyes that went wide when she saw Monique standing by the Circle Time rug. "Miss Mo!" Sophia broke free from her mother and ran full speed, arms outstretched, crashing into Monique's legs with the force of a small hurricane. Monique knelt down and gathered her close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest, the small arms wrapped tight around her neck. "I missed you," Sophia whispered. "I missed you too, baby girl." Monique's voice broke. "I missed you too." She became an advocate after that. Conference speeches about protecting vulnerable spaces, testimony before state legislatures considering childcare worker protections, interviews where she told her story again and again, not for sympathy, but for change. She spoke about the children who still flinched at loud noises, about the parents who still checked twice before leaving their kids anywhere, about the workers who deserve to do their jobs without fear of federal agents treating them like criminals. The trauma didn't disappear, but it transformed into something useful, something that mattered. 3 years later, Monique Lawson still walks through the doors of Sunshine Kids Learning Center every morning. Her title is different now: Assistant Director, responsible for staff training, parent relations, curriculum development. She still stops by the butterfly room every day, still knows every child's name, still keeps graham crackers in her desk for toddlers who need a little extra comfort. Some things don't change, some things shouldn't. The center installed a bronze plaque in the lobby last spring. It hangs beside the welcome sign, above the cubbies where parents store diaper bags and extra clothes. The words are simple: every child deserves to feel safe. Every worker deserves dignity. Now, watching footage like this, it can really stick with you, right? Some of these clips stay in your head, especially late at night when you're trying to fall asleep. And speaking of sleep, if you're someone who lies awake at 2 or 3 a.m., mind racing, unable to shut off, I know how frustrating that is. You're exhausted, but your brain just won't stop. And the worst part? The less you sleep, the worse it gets. Your energy crashes, your mood suffers, everything feels harder than it should. I struggled with this for years. Tried melatonin, white noise, warm milk, nothing worked long term. Then I found something called the 30-Day Uninterrupted Sleep Reset. It's a science-based program, no pills, no medication, that actually retrains your brain to sleep through the night, 7 to 8 hours, uninterrupted. It uses the same method sleep clinics charge thousands for. But instead of paying for expensive doctors, you get a clear, step-by-step plan you can follow from home. Over 30 days, it rewires your sleep system. And once you're done, you keep the results. There's a maintenance plan so you don't slip back. Look, if you've tried everything and nothing sticks, this is different. I'll leave a link in the description below.